Great. And so with that, my name is Camille Gray. I'm class of '05. As you can see, welcome everybody. This is our Vocational Velocity panel. We are ABPA, the Association of Black Princeton Alumni, and I'm joined by a very distinguished panel tonight that I'm really excited about. We have Kamil Ali-Jackson, Rahsaan Harris, and Franne McNeal. I'm going to turn it to them for them to do introductions, but I also want to introduce Eric Plummer, who's the head of the ABPA, as well as the co-chairs of the programming committee, which I serve on, Karen and Danica. So welcome. So we'll proceed by having a conversation with our panelists. And then at the end, we'll leave about 15-20 minutes for questions for Q&A, and we'll ask you to put any questions that you may have into the chat. So with that, let me turn it to Fran for your introduction, and then we'll go through and jump in.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Camille, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Franne McNeal, and I wear several hats. So in terms of the question, what do I do now? In my career, I am both an employee and an entrepreneur. I am about to be the executive director for the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program based out of Community College in Philadelphia. And as an entrepreneur, I am president of Significant Business Results, LLC. So some of my career highlights since leaving Princeton, aside from the occasional moment of, oh, wow, did I really want to leave Princeton? And gosh, the world is really different after Princeton, was that I got to work for a pharmaceutical company and legally sell drugs. And I had an opportunity, which was a hoot, you know, when you're 21 and people ask, what do you do? And I had an opportunity to work in the banking industry and the manufacturing industry. And those are highlights because I just realized how harsh and cruel corporate America could be. And that led me to want to be an entrepreneur. And I think the biggest misconception that I had about working when I graduated from Princeton is that I needed to be sort of the best employee, and that, you know, kind of working hard would be enough. And I've, you know, definitely at this point in my life feel that work, career, and life is always about the 3 R's: relationships, results, and then revenue. And revenue can be measured in dollars. And revenue can also be measured in how much value you add for others. So that's me, Franne McNeal, class of '82, the great class of '82, whose 40th reunion is 2022.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fran. And for the audience, I asked each of the panelists to share, you know, a little bit about what they're up to, some of their career highlights, and as you heard, maybe one of the biggest surprises that they faced, or in the workforce, or one of the biggest misconceptions that they had about working when they left Princeton. And just one reminder that I forgot to mention, we are recording this meeting, so if you don't want your cameras on, feel free to turn them off, but we love to see your faces. And with that, I will turn to Camille.
Hi, everybody. I am Kamil Ali-Jackson, class of '81, parent of class of 2018, spouse of class of '79, sister of class of '78, a cousin of class of '83 and 2015. I have to give my family their props. So we're definitely a Princeton family. And so to respond to the question about what am I doing right now? Well, first of all, I am a lawyer by trade. And I was the chief legal officer and the co-founder of a small pharmaceutical company that I co-founded back in 2012. I have co-founded several small pharmaceutical companies since about 2005. And right now, what am I doing? Right now, January 3rd of last week, I retired formerly from the company that I co-founded. And I'm telling you right now, I've just been sitting here in shock and awe, okay? Shock and awe that I am 62 years old and I'm still standing, actually still sitting, because of the fact that, one, I had a child that died, okay, at a very young age. I have 4 children. I only have, my only son died, and I have 3 daughters who are now all grown. And that I survived and thrived in an all-white male environment. Didn't want me there, didn't try to get me there, didn't support me when I was there, didn't appreciate me when I was there, and now really miss me now that I'm gone. So I am so glad that this is frankly the first day of the new chapter in my life. In terms of what things have been highlights in my career, I worked for a law firm, and that law firm ended up ranking me in the lowest category of all of the other law firm associates in my class at that time. Thank you, Pepper, for getting it wrong. Because of that, I left that law firm and went in-house to a global pharmaceutical company, Merck. And I learned not only about being an employee, I learned about equity and stock ownership, something I would never have learned of if I'd stayed at the law firm. Then from Merck, because I got into dispute with my supervisor there, I ended up leaving again. And because I was pushed, and therefore I jumped into entrepreneur land. Again, thank you, Merck. Thank you, my former supervisor, for pushing me, okay? Because again, as a result of that, I ended up creating all of these small pharmaceutical companies, not only creating wealth for myself and for my children and for my family personally, but creating jobs and wealth for my Black community. So those are the things that I believe are the highlights. In terms of things that I found out after I left Princeton, when I was at Princeton, I thought it was a meritocracy. When I went beyond Princeton and started working, I realized merit, competency had nothing to do with it, except when you were Black and trying to get promoted, okay? Or when you were Black and trying to get into the door or into the room. Then meritocracy was used against you as a barrier to explain why you didn't get something, why you didn't get that particular position. So I learned very quickly, as Fran mentioned, that it was frankly more about relationships than it was about what you could do.
Thanks, Camille. I can't wait for the discussion. Rahsaan.
Hello, Rahsaan Harris, class of 1995. What do I do today besides having a PhD in urban and public policy? I am the CEO of Citizens Committee for New York City. We are one of the oldest micro grant organizations in the country, and we give away approximately on average $3,000 to community organizations, and that in aggregate is over $1 million each year. I got my position as this grant maker on March 2020, right when the pandemic hit. So having such the honor and privilege to be able to support community level leaders, and we're also supporting neighborhood businesses, 10 people or less, in this moment is critical and such an honor. Career highlights, got to go to the Peace Corps in Uruguay right when I graduated, environmental education, became a public school teacher in New York City, was a grant maker as part of the Atlantic Philanthropies. It had a $4 billion endowment when I was around, and spent over $8 billion in this full lifetime before I ended up here. And I think that goes into my lesson of what I learned leaving Princeton. There are 2 things. Number one, where you started, EEB, is not necessarily where you're going to end. And if people try to put you in a box, tell them the devil is a lie, that you can do what you want to do. If you can see it, you can be it, set your intentions and be with your people, and they will help you get there. And second, and I think is a little bit related, is Some folks feel they need to put themselves in a box and they can't bring their authentic self to work. And me being someone that was an inclusive person, but calls out disparities and calls out the truth, not to divide, but to really shine lights on things and figure out how we can move together forward in a new kind of reality, has been something that served me, because besides my day job, I get to speak on wonderful panels and talk about inclusion in nonprofit and corporate settings. And that's me being authentically me. And I don't think any of my degrees were that. And I think it's given me more opportunities than I never would have had if I didn't allow myself to be vulnerable. Caveat: you got to pick and choose your spots, people. You know this, like there's not one speed all the time, but if you allow your light to shine in certain spaces, you'll be rewarded for it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harris. So with that, let's jump into the conversation. So I'm going to moderate. Panelists, feel free to talk amongst yourselves and feel free to take the questions you want. But with that, so how or when did you decide to accelerate your career? I'm going to open it up.
Rahsaan? Or
I'll do it. So it wasn't necessarily an intentional spot that I wanted to be the head of an organization by said date. But I think I was really intentional about learning. And the thing is, putting your head down and just doing your work might be cool if you want to be, in somebody's box. But if you want to break out of those boxes, you gotta accelerate what you're learning, like all the potential weak spots, or expanding your view, taking stretch assignments, formal and informal education. I love the entrepreneurship that that was talked about, by Franne McNeal, because side hustles can end up being the reason why someone else hires you for your main gig, or it can be a side hustle, can be your entrepreneurial thing that launches you to somewhere else. So I think what really accelerated me was trying to be a big learner. And then the second thing was always volunteering and showing up for ABPA, showing up for Princeton, showing up for your church, showing up for your employee resource group at work allows you to get some stretch assignments and show leadership in ways that might not be formally put in your job title. But then when you're doing that, folks will see you differently, not necessarily in your organization, but as you toggle out in the real world, folks will know you beyond what your job description is, and they'll see you to potentially become like a CEO leader type in the future.
I have to be very honest. It wasn't intentional for me. People say plan things, and it's not. It's like a John Lennon song. I think he said something about life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. And so, it wasn't intentional. I'm a very emotional and very reactive person. So every positive thing that has happened to me is because somebody counted me out or said I couldn't do something. And then I got mad, picked up the phone, talked to my sisters, talked about the people, got all riled up, and then went out and did something about it, got another job. I left. Okay. That's how I accelerated my career, by not staying where I was not appreciated or my value was not validated by other people. I finally learned, stop looking for that validation externally. I validate my own self. Okay. My work validates what I'm doing. Okay. And then ultimately you get a result. So I've never been intentional about, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that. It's more like, I just got graded and they told me I didn't make the grade. Okay. I'm going to go look for something else because I know that I can do X, Y, and Z.
I love the energy here because I'm somewhere in between both of you. I remember in Princeton, junior year, I went to career services and I made a whole poster board of where I wanted to be in the next 5 years. And my father dragged that out for me a few years ago. And I'm like, I believed everything on that poster board. And then my senior year, I interviewed with what was then SmithKline Beecham. It's now GlaxoSmithKline. And the then president of the company was a history major from Princeton. So I just knew that when I got accepted in the management training program, for some reason, I didn't see color. So the fact that he was an older white man, I saw Princeton, history major, there, I'm going to be there. And I kind of went in with, you know, this is going to happen. And I had my little poster board to prove it. Well, I'll tell you, it didn't take long. I know the topic is accelerate your career. For me, every time I saw a wall, it ended up being something that got to be something that slapped me in the face. It stopped me. And then I said, you know what? I probably can't break down this wall, but I'm going to push it down and use it as a springboard for something else. So I can specifically remember in the management training program, they put me next to a printer and I was supposed to be doing statistical analysis. And this is, again, 40 years ago. So they were like the noisy Oki data, you know, like 36-inch printer. And I said, excuse me, I can't concentrate. And they must have looked at me like, hey, look, young Black girl, we don't want you here anyway. We put you in the corner and I don't know why you're speaking up. But I'm like, I'm supposed to be doing the work. And then they asked me, then I thought, well, if I can't really concentrate, why don't I go out on the manufacturing floor and sort of get the statistical data live? So I kind of walked a few blocks, introduced myself to, they were called the pink ladies in the manufacturing floor, introduced myself, asked some questions. Again, I didn't see color. You know, I was a management trainee, ask questions, learn, investigate. No sooner than did I leave the manufacturing floor, and I did not see any of the signs that people were like, what's this Black woman doing in there without a safety, a little hairnet? My manager called me in and said, what were you doing? And I was like, oh, proud. Blah, 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 blah. He's like, you don't do that. You don't walk outside of your box. I heard you complain about the printer. And so accelerate my career, I suddenly realized that career and corporate life was not about bringing your best. It was about staying in that box that was your job assignment and being grateful that you were getting paid. And I'm like, this is strange. And I remember in that conversation, my manager saying, you know, you're probably going to be an entrepreneur. And I didn't really know what he meant. And I sort of interpreted it as a compliment. What he was saying to me is, you may last until the end of this training assignment, but probably you're not going to go any further. And when the training program finished officially, there was no spot for me next. So, you know, again, this is 40 years ago. I'm sure all of the folks that are young alumni are much smarter than I was then. But accelerating your career, if you leave it in the hands of others, you can't necessarily plan it out to a T. But if you wait, as Camille said, for others to validate you, you know, not a good thing.
Yeah, but Fran, what you're saying though is, I think, is so important to emphasize. It's that oftentimes what is considered failure is actually the impetus or the trigger that actually pushes you to something that's going to actually make you succeed. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you're told that you're a failure, at least in the legal career, if you're not going to make partner. Okay. Mm-hmm. So 5th year associate, I'm told you're not going to make partner, you know, 3 years from now, you're now considered a failure. You will not be able to work anywhere else. No, it's not true. That's the trigger. You really, truly have to look at that being the trigger to actually doing something else that you're maybe better suited for. As a result of me always being pushed, I ended up doing much better, and I don't look back. I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. My children get royalty checks as a result of me selling my companies because I became an entrepreneur rather than staying an employee with an E, you know, rather than an equity owner with a big E. in my own companies that I co-founded. And I would never have discovered that if I hadn't failed. As Winston Churchill says, guys, success is never final and failure is not fatal. Okay?
Absolutely.
So that's what I learned through all of my different failures.
I want to chime in on that. This Fran, what you said, going in colorblind and just doing what you thought was just generally right, I don't think is the wrong instinct. The one component's missing with that, I think, is a power analysis of what's happening in a larger environment in the ecosystem. I think being blind to how we show up doesn't necessarily do us a service. And when we are cognizant of how we show up, it allows us to calibrate when we need to and really make sure that when we're pushing the envelope, we know we're pushing the envelope and we know when we're strategically taking a risk, versus at other times creating an environment where you think, oh my gosh, can I keep my job? Can I still pay my rent or my mortgage? And feeling like the psychological lack of safety that you have when you don't know when you're calling your shots. And so I think it's both things, because not everyone's built to be an entrepreneur, but I also don't think that everyone that works within a larger system needs to just conform, because you can be the person that's the innovator, you know, to reach new markets, to get new ideas. Folks need to not be in a group thing. They need to reach different people and have a different cultural competency so they don't fall into those mistakes. And I think sometimes cookie cutter folks that have been trained to survive in these institutions just go in survival mode the whole while, and you can't accelerate. But you got to be willing to say, all right, this is the bet I'm taking on myself, or this is the amount of risk I'm taking. And everyone has their risk tolerance, and just figure out from there. So it's like an informed action.
Yes. And right. And I love the color blind versus power blind, that environmental analysis. It took me a while to develop that. Now, Camille shared that she had her sisters, and I was the oldest of 4 girls. And while my parents were both professionals, they were in environments where they were professionals, but they weren't political. And so in some ways, my mother would always say, you know, why are you talking so much? And it was that I had the confidence to talk, and I knew I had the academic, you know, I was sort of academically right, but I didn't have that, hey, read the room. And then often when I would speak up in a corporate environment, if there were white males, whatever I would say was never heard. So I think in some odd way, my sense was thrown off because I was never kind of listened to. So sometimes I spoke louder, or sometimes I was so used to being ignored that I just kind of forgot that there actually were people listening, and they were listening to steal my ideas or listening to hold me back. And so that colorblind, power blind, and you know, that's an interesting, you know, if I could go back 40 years, I'd be like, oh yeah. But that's the power of the network, like ABPA, you know, that's the power of being able to say, hey, here are people that I can bounce ideas off of. Here, you know, am I crazy? Yeah, maybe you are, and you're probably crazily right on target.
Yeah, but Fran and Rahsaan, that's the problem though. At least I'm class of 81, so our generation, many of us were first generation college students. Okay, my parents didn't even go to college. My father wasn't even high school educated. So there was no one telling us about how you read the room or read the air, as they say in Japan, okay? They didn't know anything about power dynamics. And Fran, my mother, who was a housewife, common sense, she would say, Camille, your problem is, when I would come home and talk about stuff that was going on in this white environment, is, she said, everybody wants to be a leader. Nobody wants to be a follower. She was so right. Okay. She kept trying to tell me, you got to learn it first before you start telling other people how to do it. Okay. But the bottom line is, if you're not taught that, or you don't see that, or you don't have anybody that's reflecting that in your household, or you didn't have the ABPA network back then, guys. You know, we were the beginning of the ABPA, okay? We were the pioneers of the ABPA. There weren't networks like there are now. There were always the white networks, but nobody told me at Career Services when I went and talked to Minnie Reed, hey, you're supposed to be talking to the white Wall Street broker if you want to know about money, okay? I walked in out of Harvard Law School. I walked into my first job interview for the Securities Exchange Commission, and the person asked me a question. He said, what's the difference between a stock and a bond? I had no idea. My parents didn't own any stock. I never owned any stock. So I said, I don't know. And so when the guy asked me at the end of the interview, do you have any questions? I said, I don't have this job. I'm not getting this job, but guess what? I'm going to learn something before I walk out of this interview. So I said to him, what's the difference between the stock and a bond? Got the job because he could not believe that I had the nerve to ask him his question back to him. Okay, so he gave it to me for
That's
just being
Camille.
so bold. But my point is, though, that we don't know about power dynamics and power analysis. We didn't learn that. We didn't know about networking. You know, it's Rahsaan is so right, though, and Fran's so right. You can't just do your job. It is about relationships, guys. That's something I've certainly learned in my over 35 years of working in pharma now.
Thanks, Camille. And I want to come back to several themes that I've heard, certainly on relationships. Rahsaan, you mentioned filling in the gaps in your weak spots, going to come back to that. And Fran, I think you talked about like hitting walls and knowing when to move on or to pivot. But before jumping back into some of those themes, what are your thoughts on promoting yourself? You all are distinguished leaders. So how, you know, or were you born comfortable with self-promotion, or how did you develop that skill set that I assume that you all have? What's your point of view on it? The importance of self-promotion, putting yourself out there in order to get ahead.
So I'm going to answer this with a simple response. Yes, you need to self-promote. It is something I did not learn until I was 60 years old, okay? I was too busy doing my job and trying to be the best lawyer, okay? Because remember that meritocracy. My father was a sergeant major in the Army. That's a meritocracy, you know, organization. And so he taught us, you work really hard and you will get the gold ring. Not true, okay? So you have to promote yourself. Brag about yourself like your mother brags about you, okay? I'm not kidding, okay? You have to believe that you are just as important as anybody else that walks into the room, whether you're walking into the C-suite or you're walking into the manufacturing plant. You have to be your own self-promoter. My first company that we took public in 2015, we were the #1 IPO across any industry in 2015. So we ended up hiring this really fancy PR firm, and the PR firm came in, did an analysis of the C-suite, all white males and myself. And then they made a major mistake and they ended up getting fired. They come in and they do a presentation to the C-suite and they called me the deal maker. They gave every C-suite person a nickname and they called me the deal maker, not the CEO. Fired, okay? Because they wanted to promote the fact that there's this Black female, which was pretty unusual, who co-founded a pharma company that had just gone public, which was unusual at that time, okay? And I was the deal maker. Not a good idea. They believe you should be promoting the CEO. So what I learned after that was I need to promote myself. So I pay attention to your junk mail, guys. When people send you an email, respond, okay? Was the organization. I ended up ever spoke in Boston. As a result, that particular person went off to write a book. She then put me in her book about 10 inspirational women. And from there, I've just been promoting myself, getting articles, whether it's earned media, whether you have to pay them or get somebody, one of your supporters, your law firms to pay. Doesn't matter how you get in there, just do it. But you got to promote yourself, because if you don't promote yourself, why should you expect anybody else to promote you?
I would say start small too, because again, you have some huge entrepreneurs and big personalities that might be on this panel, and you might look at yourself and you say, self, I don't know if I'm going to write a book. Self, I don't know if I'm going to have an Instagram. Listen, you can do a LinkedIn, get a great shot of yourself, have your friend go outside with your, iPhone 13 and get the nice portrait view, or pay for someone to get a headshot. Fill out what you've done and list accomplishments, not just like, I'm a VP. And when you're on Instagram, on LinkedIn, what you can do is post articles, post ideas that you don't even necessarily produce yourself, but things that you found interesting that will have others pay attention to the types of thoughts you're having and the type of leadership you might provide, thought leadership might provide if they brought you into their endeavor. Just being invisible, it's not going to be the Holy Grail. Like the Lord's going to have to come down and find you if you're invisible, right? Like, don't leave it just to the Lord, help out a little something, I love the Lord as much as everybody else, but come on, but help the Lord out. And then the last thing I would say on that is again, self-promotion. If you don't feel comfortable about yourself, make it about the we, make it about the community, make it about the geography you represent, and make it about your cultural identity, make it about, you're so passionate about accountants and want all the accountants to know what you're doing, because then you can you'll find your people. And then when you find that network, your net worth is your network. And so that's what you got to lean into, find your people. And that's why being more out there is really helpful.
Right. And the self-promotion I'm going to build on really what was just said. If the self part is you're getting stuck on, then think about the promotion. What are you interested in? What gets you excited? What do you want to genuinely share? And then find a place where when you share it, people are like, oh, wow, that's good to know. So I work with someone who recently became a pet parent. And so I find that when and she happens to be from Norway. So when I find things related to Norway and or related to pets, I'll put them together in a little 2-sentence or 3-sentence blurb to her and send them to her. And she lights up, she smiles, and she's like, oh, Fran, I love it. And really what she's saying is she appreciates being appreciated. So then the next time that I talk to her about something or I make an ask, she's like, oh, wait, Fran wants this. So self-promotion through helping others. I am at Princeton, I was a sort of quiet, heads down, I'm here to do my homework, and that's pretty much it. That's also what my mother reminded me. We did not send you there. My freshman year, I came back and I said, I'm involved in this and I'm involved in that and I'm involved. And she said, what are your grades and how much time are you spending in the library? And I'm like, oh, but let me tell you. She's like, okay, wait a minute. Let me refresh your memory. This is why we sent you there. So, this whole relationship thing, this whole community thing, that's not what she was about. Now that I'm older and I understand how the world works sort of a la, 2000 plus, the self-promotion, if you help others, the networking is because you're giving to help other people get ahead.
Yeah.
What's important is to make sure that the tribe or the place that you're trying to get ahead is one that in your heart and in your mind makes sense for you to be, because you're going to learn something, you're going to contribute something, and it's a good place for you to be. And then when you promote someone else, they will definitely have your back and promote you. And so it's that combination. And you've got to feel good about yourself. And you tend to feel good about yourself when you're talking about something that you believe in.
Yeah. Well, let's just put another label. let's just put another label on it then, guys. Okay, let's not call it promotion. Let's call it education. Okay. So you are passing along information. You're trying to educate other people. It may be about you, but it may be also about things that you're interested in and that the other person might be interested in. So you're trying to inform and educate. Whatever label works for you, use it, guys.
Good point.
Because nobody is going to worry about promoting you more than you should be concerned about promoting yourself. Okay. So you got to do it for yourself.
Yeah. And no one wants to promote sort of quote unquote a nobody. I mean, so to Camille's point, you know, you got to be somebody. People want to be associated with somebody that's going somewhere. Even to the point that there's some people that don't mind being associated with people that are really going in the wrong spot. So you don't have to be that person, but you know.
I feel like these are really good, actionable recommendations. Want to hear what people are thinking about in the chat, and we're certainly going to come to questions. But wanted to circle back to, you know, like these roadblocks that it sounds like you've all faced or turning points in your career, and get your thoughts on, you know, how to navigate around those. I think maybe certainly Camille and Fran have talked about roadblocks. And one question that I did not share in advance, but that I have now is, do you think you could have anticipated some of the career roadblocks that you encountered and made moves in advance?
I'm going to go really quickly because I want to be full transparency about failure. So I was in NYU in a doctoral program. I got to the point where it's time for me to take my qualifying exams and propose my dissertation idea. And the gatekeeper said, no, we're not going to let you go to the next level. So I was like shocked, Princeton educated, Columbia master's degree. All of a sudden, these folks are not going to let me write my dissertation. Like, what happened? And what I learned from that, there were some signs early on, like I'd passed all the classes and I'd done this stuff. But, you know, some of the times like, oh, well, that idea, Rahsaan, I don't know how I feel about that. And so what I was trying to conform myself to be more what they wanted me to be. That wasn't necessarily authentically me, but it still wasn't necessarily enough. So fast forward, I got into another program, had to start over from scratch because doctoral credits don't transfer. The idea that I had got a $25,000 dissertation scholarship from a national competition. I was one of 5 selected for it. And I went through my program in record time. And what I learned from it is, and this was a message from before, sometimes it's not you, it's really them. Like my ideas were valid. I think it made them uncomfortable and that they didn't know how to, because I did my dissertation on Black philanthropy and understanding, does race or class better describe Black giving? Like that whole space of having Blackness and race not just be like one of the throwaway variables, but be like one of the central parts of the study, that, you know, the folks that were educating me weren't down with that. But the idea was valid for a lot of other folks I wanted to found, supported me and helped me become Dr. Rahsaan Harris now. So the thing is, don't give up on yourself just on certain ideas. You got to find your community. Sometimes when people are telling you what they think, and this is like reading the room, calibrate yourself to be ready for a potential upcoming failure and how you're going to pivot, but don't let it steal your heart. So you can recognize they're not feeling you, but still recognize, believe in yourself at the same time and hold both of those things together.
Listen, my biggest roadblock was not in my career. It was personally, okay? I had a child die, and I didn't want to get up, okay? Let alone worry about whether or not I could go to work. And because of my husband, my mother, and I had a 2-year-old, okay, a little girl who did not know what was going on, and she needed her hair done. And my husband was a lawyer and is a lawyer, and my husband can't do hair. And my mother, who had 4 girls, can't do hair. And so I had to get up and do her hair. And that saved me, okay? And it also made me very, very fearless, because the worst had happened to me. And there was nothing that any of these white men in corporate America could do to me after that that could top that for me. So I became fearless, not reckless, okay, but fearless. I am not a good navigator. I am not a good driver, according to my husband and my sisters, okay? So I did not know how to navigate. And once that my child died, I stopped caring about navigating. I decided I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm thinking, whether you like it or not. And I'm not saying this is the recipe for everybody. This is a very unique situation, okay? I wouldn't wish this on anybody. But because of that, okay, I am where I am right now. Because I got back up, became fearless, realized that there was nothing that they could do to me, okay? And also because I worked my butt off. So they didn't like me, but so what? Their opinion of me is not my business, okay? You just need to respect me. You don't need to like me. That's what I learned, okay? But because I worked my butt off, they knew I would get the job done. So even if they didn't like me, even if they didn't seek me out, even if they didn't put me there on purpose, you know, they inherited me from somebody else. They kept coming back to me because I would get the work done. Okay, I would get the job done. So remember what I said about, I thought it was a meritocracy when I left Princeton, but it's really not. Well, for Black folks right now, guys, we still have to be competent, more than competent, but we still have to be competent. So don't take that as, you know, relationships are going to get you something. No, you've got to be at a minimum competent, Black folks. And then you've got to learn that you need to look up from your work, look to the, you know, to the left of you, look to the right of you, interact and engage with everybody that's in that environment with you, okay? To learn something from them and to teach them something and hopefully change their mind about how they interact with other Black folks, okay? And then leave that environment and go get your own.
Camille, the question again. This is I'm like drinking all this in, and I know the question, but I've forgotten it. So
yes, it was about navigating roadblocks. And I guess the question I asked was, and thank you, that was very powerful, Camille. Thank you for sharing that, and about becoming fearless. But yeah, the question was navigating roadblocks, and I added in the twist of, in hindsight, do you think you could have anticipated any of those roadblocks that, you know, you ended up encountering?
I mean, from where I started out, I thought planning was, you know, planning and anticipating the next move was always possible. And that was based on the assumption that the world was fair. The world isn't fair. When I started out, I was always the youngest, was and still am Black, and was and still am female. So now I'm older. But the fact of the matter is, when I open up my mouth, people turn around and they're afraid. And I'm like, wait, I still have my real teeth, but basically I'm toothless. I mean, you know, like, you're afraid of me? I'm like, I didn't even have coffee yet. So I'm concerned. So navigating, I never was really good at. I typically am kind of like a kangaroo. I hop around. I want to try to get over what I see as a potential roadblock so that I have the perspective to know whether or not I'm going to hop left or right. For me, being a Black woman, walking, bicycling, driving, no, I need a super jet, because there's always little devils or big devils try in my way. And these are incompetent people who are in power and who are holding me back. So it's not a roadblock, it's a systemic, you know, like there are laws and policies. I mean, oh, you can't do that. That's not possible. And I'm like, but wait, John, who doesn't have the degree or doesn't have the credential. So no, navigating, no, I'm like create my own piloting system. I mean, before there were drones, I had the Franne drone system. Like, you know, what satellite, you know, I'm sorry, I just didn't have the electrical engineering or whatever to kind of put it together and make it a product. But yeah, you have to have that superpower of figuring out and assuming there are roadblocks. And they're systemic and they're not going to move just because you're doing the right thing, you're a good person. You've got to have almost like the Underground Railroad. You've got to have your network underground, over the ground, across the world. And it's kind of all the black hands, brown hands tied together. You cannot.
But Fran, that's why we have to really, guys, you know, the people from the 1970s and 80s, it's amazing what has happened since that time frame in terms of all of the Black excellence that we see now. It's unbelievable. You can't turn around without seeing somebody that's the CFO or the CEO, you know, or the head of NASDAQ or the head of New York Stock Exchange. But those titles mean nothing if we're afraid. Okay, it's like in the old movie Young Frankenstein, where, you know, Gene Wilder had a hump on his back, and every time they kept saying you've got a hump, and say, what hump? Okay, when you have, you're right, you know, when you have Black people are in these positions of power, but they are afraid to use that power to help other Black people, then we have failed. Okay, that power means nothing. So if we learn anything, guys, all of this Black excellence on the phone right now, please don't make these empty words where you say, I'm going to pay it forward. Please, if you have to do it, you know, under the table, you know, behind closed doors, open the door and let other people in the room. Do not let them seduce you with this only.
Yeah.
Okay. With this idea that you are special and that's the only reason you're in the room. No, you're not special. Okay.
Right. That's what
there are so many excellent.
They isolate you and isolate you from all reality. Yeah. You've got to stay connected. And the whole idea of, you know, anyone on this Zoom, definitely connect up with each of us, connect up with each other. You know, I recently had an opportunity to do something special, and someone, and so the person was kind of like, well, you know, Fran, you're the only Black person I know, and I'm asking. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding. Number one, you're lucky this is not being recorded. So, you know, this is being recorded. I'm like, really? I'm the only Black person you know? So I'm like, well, you know, I appreciate that you thought of me. And since I'm the only Black person that you know, let's set up a meeting and I'm going to introduce you to 10 other qualified people. And they were, I mean, the look on their face, now this is virtually, but I thought I was going to have to call 911 because they just weren't prepared for that. And I'm like, you know, if you think that I can help you, let me bring in, and I really do try to work with people in different decades. So let me bring in someone that's 30, someone that's 40, someone that's 50, and there's someone that's 70. And then let me bring in people from different industries because I know some stuff and I'm confident in what I know. And imagine if you had all this other talent. And then because I'm an entrepreneur, I'm like, so what's the fee? And again, they were like, well, we thought you would volunteer. And I said, yes, what I'm volunteering is to help you set the fee. They're like,
that.
oh, I'm like, oh no, this is part of my expertise. So who do we need to talk to? Is it the board chair? And I know after like 5 minutes, they were like, oh gosh, maybe Fran isn't the only Black person I know, but nope, I'm already, my foot is in the door. So, you know, but that, I mean, that's part of what you have to do. To Camille's point, you bring in other people. you can't walk in the door alone.
Thanks, Fran. And we are totally over time. I have like 20 more questions on my list, but we are approaching the end. So I have two closing questions. I'll start with one. Rahsaan, you had talked about, understanding your weak spots and like working to close them. And I'm curious about what investments you all made that you felt were valuable, maybe what was not valuable, and thinking of investments, answer that in terms of skills, relationships, headshots, coaching. Anybody can take that. Or Rahsaan, please.
I will go since you invoked my name. So one thing, and I also want to get to Crystal's question about like switching careers and going from one career to another. I'm trying to meld these two answers together. I think one skill that was a weakness is finding allies and co-conspirators that might be sponsors that don't look like you. So if you're changing a career, you're walking into a different space, there might be that middle-aged white man that for some reason loves talking to you, that's going to give you a chance to do something that otherwise wouldn't have happened, just like the other white folks get. And you, for some reason, you got the golden ticket. Like Charlie in the chocolate factory, like try to find that golden ticket and like look for it. Now, don't expect the golden ticket to always be there, but I'm just saying, don't say that they don't exist at all. I mean, I love Wakanda and we should always be looking for Wakanda too. And, if good white folks gonna do right by you, like give them the chance to do that. So look for those linkages when there's commonality, and kind of when we were talking about the failure questions, like, did you see it coming? It if someone's really not feeling you, you're wasting your time. So you'll pick it up and you won't waste your time on that person becoming your sponsor. But if someone's showing you a little bit of favor, then you can use them to figure out how to make moves that you wouldn't have made before, or to get stretched assignments and change careers. And the other investment that I literally did was I really tried to lean into data analysis. So that's one of the reasons why I tried to get a PhD. And I got a PhD. Like really leaning into being able to just not talk fancy about issues of race and social issues, but really talking about metrics and becoming more strategic. Me being a strategic mind shows up at work, and I think folks value that. And that's also something that, is the hard work that goes into folks not being able to deny certain opportunities for me on that basis.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally agree with that. An investment that I made is really continuing to get involved in professional associations and also fun stuff. I can be very focused, and what certainly before COVID, and COVID reminded me, and then the passing of my mother a few years ago, that the people you love aren't going to be around forever. And that while work may seem wildly important, or that contract, only you can do it, having a network of people so you can step away, so that you can have time to relax, so that you can go to that family barbecue or that fun event, just investing in the relationships outside of the work you do, and making time to take care of yourself is just absolutely critical. I mean, particularly as I work with entrepreneurs, sanity is up there with success. And it's very easy to be insane. And in this case, in does not mean not. A lot of people are not sane. A lot of people are not happy. And the investment in, trying to be your best self around the people that you love. Sometimes when you had a hard day at work, you end up bringing that nastiness and you yell at the person that you love the most. Wrong. So investing in the relationships. So that's something that took me a while to really recognize, I mean, it's nice to have a job, it's nice to have a paycheck, it's nice to have a business, it's nice to have clients, and all of those things can go. It's absolutely priceless to have family. And when they go, all you have are their memories. And if you are suddenly regretting that you didn't spend time with them, that's terrible. Money doesn't replace that.
Thanks, Fran. And Camille, any sort of last thoughts on investing in, or what you did invest in that helps you really see a difference in your career?
Well, maybe I'll take, because I think you also talked about skills. Because I think Rahsaan and Fran, covered in terms of the types of things you should be investing in and what you should invest in. But in terms of skills, one of the things I think is you've got to be able to ask for help, guys. We're Princeton grads, so we want everybody to think that we know everything. Well, you got to be able to ask for help. Okay, it's not fatal. There's no such thing as, oh my goodness, I asked the wrong question. If you don't know, you don't know, and you might actually get a job out of it if you do ask. You got to give help. Stop always focusing on yourself. Success shouldn't be so inward focused. It should be outward focused. What can I do to help other people? Keep the hand outstretched. The favors will flow in, favors will flow out, but you keep the hand outstretched. If you got it like a fist, nothing flows out, nothing flows back in. Okay? So truly, truly be generous with your time. Try to teach the people at this level. If you've got the idiot above you that's your boss, you can't do anything about that old guy or that young woman. Try reflecting and dealing with the people at this level. And then when they go on to become the chief whatever in the C-suite, then they'll remember, hey, this particular person helped me on X, Y, and Z. I'm going to be like this. Or, hey, I think that's actually a better skill, a better way to be a leader, to lead people. Okay? Be a perpetual learner. Don't think you already know everything. Guys, there's so many things out there that you can still learn. And also, I look for, especially in Entrepreneur America, doers. Do not come into my office and tell me that you do not do this, you don't carry water. Whenever I interviewed anybody that I hired, and I hired a Spencer Brown, a Princeton alumni, first thing I asked him was, when I said, can you deal with a strong Black woman? And he said, Camille, I'm a Black man. I got a Black mama. Okay. Yes, I can deal with a strong answer. That's my boss, right? But then also, are you a doer? Is anything below you? Is anything below you? Because we're a small company. We need people who are going to carry their own water, not look for other people to carry it for them. So always be that doer. And let me tell you, in Entrepreneur America, that counts for so much, because if you're the doer at the ground floor, you will end up becoming the co-founder of the next company that they create.
Well, this has been great. Thank you all. I think that will conclude my questions, and just wanted to look in the chat to see if there are any questions from those in attendance. This has been excellent. Lots of great ideas. Crystal, I think Rahsaan, you had addressed the question earlier about changing industries. Any other thoughts? It sounds like Camille and Fran, you've also changed industries. Do you have perspective?
I didn't necessarily change industries. What I did was, because I was a lawyer in a law firm, so I did a lot of different things. I ended up working when I was in-house in a law firm, for a large pharmaceutical company that's no longer around now. But what I did was I changed positions. I was an employee. I was a legal counsel. I was a consigliere. Instead, I ended up becoming the co-owner, the co-founder, the business person. So I went from being someone providing the advice, identifying the risks, to somebody actually implementing and executing on the operational plans. And that, as a result of that, making money, creating jobs for more than just myself. So I didn't change industry, because I ended up staying in the life sciences industry once I left the law firm, but I changed position. I'm no longer just an employee. I employ other people. I create jobs for other people.
Thank you. One question that's come in is, and I think I'll just read it. Somebody attended a presentation today from an HBS professor. She concentrated on unpacking harm and the need to distinguish in the workplace among the cruel, careless, unaware, and clueless, and how we need to help rather than condemn the unaware and clueless. What's your view on this? And how much energy do we need to spend with the clueless?
I'd say know thyself, like, what you can deal with. The Lord doesn't give you more than you can bear. So like, like pray on it. Like you're not there to save everybody else. You know what you have the energy for. And again, you also probably have a sense policy wise, what is true like HR harm. So on the spectrum, make sure you're not getting discriminated against. For the love of God, don't let that happen. And then, based off of the spirit that you have, figure out how much you want to bring people along. Sometimes that's a leadership challenge that you can work into growing in an organization. But again, it's not your cross to bear if you did not so choose. So I think definitely know yourself, because do no harm, put the mask on yourself when they fall down before trying to help others in the plane.
Listen, at the end of the day, guys, I have 3 daughters, millennials, and they get offended about everything. Okay. So I've said to them, when you get in the real workplace, oh my goodness, I feel sorry for the people that are working with you, because you cannot live like that. Okay. Again, I think that we're the best generation, the generation of the 60s. Okay. I'm
no
sorry.
Bias.
You got to bring some humor. You've got to bring some, you've got to meet people where they are. Okay. I was with all white males. If they felt like they couldn't say what they said to me, that I would not be in the room when I needed to be in the room, when they're deciding who to hire, who to pay, what to pay, who to promote. So if I got offended every time they said something that was considered racist, sexist, or just insensitive, I wouldn't be in the room. I want to be in the room. So when I'm in the room, I started calling them, I don't curse, I call them dodo heads, okay? They would be cursing up a storm. They tried to tell a discrimination lawyer that I was cursing at them when we were having this sexual harassment, and respectful workplace conference, training. And the person said, sorry, reasonable person in jury trial will not consider dodo head to be an offensive word. And then they start talking about don't be hitting people, and I'm the only person that hit people, and then they were trying to say, she's the one that hits everybody. And they're like, sorry, nobody will believe that she is hitting you grown men, okay? my point is that bring some humor into it, right. Even if they're insulting, even if they're discriminatory, call them out on it right then and there.
Yeah, gotta do it.
Okay? People stop using the word Black in the workforce, in the workplace. I'm Black. Well, I guess maybe it was, the words have changed, but I grew up, we're Black. So I use that word. One thing Rahsaan said, though, I don't want you to bring your authentic self to work. Okay. I want you to think that I'm like your mama. Bring your best self to work. Okay. But sometimes you have to call people out, and you would be surprised that these white men, and it's usually white men because they're the ones in power, they will respect you because people have been so afraid to call them out. Okay. George Floyd died in the street. I am a Black female co-founder, C-suite person in a pharma company, and we did not want to put out an announcement about George Floyd because we had an office in St. Louis and they didn't want to offend the St. Louis folks. Okay. And I said, excuse me, we are putting out an email either under your name as the CEO or under Kamil Ali-Jackson's name as the CLO. We put out that email under the CEO's name. But if you're not in the room, guys, because you're easily offended, you won't be able to take a stand. So be in the room, smile, and then give it to them.
Thank you, Kamil. And I think on that note, I don't see any other questions coming in. This has been a great, inspiring panel. I hope you all have taken away lots of great nuggets. I've converted my thoughts on self-promotion to education. So thank you. I'm less about my weak spots and more thinking about, you know, my strengths and what I can do to really play them up in my differentiators. And I'm rethinking, you know, my thoughts on career navigation and my ability to navigate. And I appreciate that because I needed that. So thank you all for a wonderful panel. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
And
much,
my
everyone.
roomie. Hey, Lisa.
Thanks,
Hey,
hey, Camille.
Absolutely.